Hi, Sage here with Hippie from the 49th. In order to have some understanding as to why someone does what they do, you need to know something about the person. We talk a lot about decisions. We talk about actions. We talk about consequences. But we don't always take the time to look at the story behind the making of the person. Today, I want to step back for a moment, not to excuse anything, not to justify anything, but to understand. Because when we understand someone's history, their upbringing, their influences, their worldview, we start to see patterns. And when we see patterns, we can better understand the choices. So before we talk about policy or power, let's talk about the man. Vladimir Putin has officially been president of Russia since 2000. Well, sort of. But really, who is this man? He was born in 1952 in Leningrad, a city marked by unimaginable suffering during World War II. He was the youngest of 3 children. Before he was born, his family endured deep loss. During the Nazi siege of Leningrad in 1942, his older brother died of starvation. His grandmother was killed in 1941 by Nazi soldiers. His father had served in the Soviet Navy's submarine fleet. War was not an abstract idea for his family. It was personal. It was lived. It was survived. Putin grew up quiet, reserved, and he loved to read. As a young man, he trained in Sambo and Judo, disciplines rooted in control, strategy, and resilience. He would later speak of how martial arts shaped his way of thinking. He speaks Russian, German, and some English. While at Leningrad State University, he joined the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. In 1975, he graduated with a law degree. By his early 20s, the foundation of his worldview had already been shaped by war stories, by Soviet ideology, and by a deep belief in the power of the state. After graduating, Putin joined the KGB, the Soviet Union's main security and intelligence agency. Agents were known for being quite ruthless. He began working in counterintelligence, monitoring foreign nationals and protecting state secrets. Later, he transferred to the first Chief Directorate, the branch responsible for foreign intelligence operations. In 1984, he was sent to Moscow for advanced training at the Academy for Foreign Intelligence. This was not ordinary career advancement, it was preparation for work abroad. From 1985 to 1990, he was stationed in East Germany, operating under the cover of a translator. These were the final fragile years of the Soviet bloc. He witnessed firsthand the weakening of Soviet control and the growing unrest in Eastern Europe. Then in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The KGB was dissolved. Putin retired with the rank lieutenant colonel. For many in the Soviet system, the collapse was not just political, it was personal. A superpower had fallen, an identity had shattered. In 1997, Putin returned to university, earning a degree in economics from St. Petersburg University. By then, the Soviet Union was gone, but the man shaped by it was not. After leaving the KGB, Putin did not disappear from public life. He took on a role as advisor on international affairs under the mayor of St. Petersburg. Soon after, he became head of the city's Committee for External Relations, overseeing foreign investments and international partnerships. It was his first major step into government leadership. In 1996, he moved to Moscow. There, he entered the federal administration as deputy chief of the president's property management department, a position that placed him inside the inner workings of the Kremlin. In 1997, after completing his degree in economics, he was promoted to deputy chief of the presidential staff. Then, in 1998, President Boris Yeltsin appointed him director of the FSB, the Federal Security Service, the successor agency to the KGB. A former intelligence officer was now leading Russia's primary security service. His rise was swift. And by 1999, Putin had been appointed Prime Minister of Russia, positioning him one step away from the presidency. 2000 to 2004 was his first term. 2004 to 2008 was his second term. Because of term limits, he couldn't run again in 2008, so 2008 to 2012 he became Prime Minister again, while Dmitry Medvedev served as president. Then, 2012 to 2018, he was president. 2018 to present, he is still president. And after constitutional changes he made in 2020, he could potentially remain in power until 2036. The Soviet Union was formed in 1922. At its height, it stretched across 11 time zones, from the Baltic and the Black Sea in the west, across Siberia, all the way to the Bering Sea in the east. It bordered China to the south and Finland to the northwest. It was governed by a single political force, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Now, the republics within, I am going to try to list them, and I know I'm not going to pronounce them correctly, but hopefully I can do better than Trump. Okay, so number 1, Armenia. Number 2, Azerbaijan. Number 3, Belarus. Number 4, Estonia. Number 5, Georgia. Number 6, Kazakhstan. Number 7, Kyrgyzstan. Number 8, Latvia. Number 9, Lithuania. Number 10, Moldova. Number 11, Russia. Number 12, Tajikistan. Number 13, Turkmenistan. Number 14, Ukraine. And number 15, Uzbekistan. Phew. Okay. After World War II, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union began to rise. Two superpowers two competing ideologies: democracy and capitalism on one side, state socialism and one party rule on the other. This rivalry became known as the Cold War. It wasn't a traditional war fought with open battle lines. It was a war of influence, of nuclear deterrence, and of espionage. Both nations built vast intelligence networks. The KGB conducted foreign intelligence operations abroad, including the United States. The CIA operated extensively within and around Soviet interests. There were spies, there were deflectors, there were propaganda campaigns, and there were efforts on both sides to influence public opinion, undermine adversaries, and gain strategic advantage. For those who served inside the Soviet Union system, including Putin, this wasn't just geopolitics, it was a defining struggle of their generation. So here's an odd fact. The Soviet informers in the United States had a long file on Ronald Reagan that started way before he ever even became governor. And on his 80th birthday, it was delivered to him as a gift. And he said that he would enjoy reading it. Let's pause for a moment and look at the man we've just described. Growing up inside a communist system shapes a person differently than growing up in a liberal democracy. The institutions are different. The values emphasized are different. The relationship between citizen and state is different. Putin was not just a bureaucrat, he was a KGB officer. That world isn't simply a career path, it's a culture. It trains you to value loyalty, secrecy, discipline, and control. It teaches you to see threats everywhere, internal and external. For most of his life, he lived in a country that was made up of 15 republics under one centralized Soviet authority. When that union collapsed, many of people woke up in new countries overnight. Putin has openly called the collapse of the Soviet Union a geopolitical tragedy. So when we look at how he views former Soviet states, Ukraine, the Baltic nations, Central Asia, we shouldn't be surprised that his perspective is shaped by that history. But here's the other side. He was married. He is divorced. He is a father. He's a grandfather. He has spoken publicly about his love for animals. And people that love animals, they're not all that bad inside. Those who have worked closely with him describe him as controlled, calculating, and at times capable of warmth. Human beings are rarely one-dimensional. He can be diplomatic, he can be strategic, he can also be ruthless in pursuit of political objectives. And that being said, if you're still following along, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps so much and we do appreciate it. By subscribing, you help us set the algorithm so that more people see our content. In 2008, Russia went to war with Georgia. Georgia had declared independence in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Tensions had been building for years over the regions of South Ossetia, and Abkhazia. After days of fighting, Russian forces moved deep into Georgian territory. A ceasefire was negotiated. In 2021, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Russia was responsible for human rights violations committed after the ceasefire agreement. Then, in 2014, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula. Crimea had a long and complicated history. It had been an independent Crimean Khanate until 1783, when it was annexed by the Russian Empire. In 1954, it was transferred from the Russian Soviet Republic to the Ukrainian Soviet Republic. After the Soviet Union dissolved, Crimea remained part of independent Ukraine. Following political upheaval in Kiev in 2014, Russian forces took control of the peninsula. A disputed referendum was held, and Russia formally annexed the territory. Most of the international community did not recognize the annexation. In 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Putin stated that the invasion was necessary to protect Russian-speaking populations and prevent what he described as a genocide, language similar to claims made during the conflict in Georgia. The invasion violated the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, in which Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom had pledged to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and borders in exchange for Ukraine giving up its nuclear arsenal, which apparently was quite large. It also shattered the Minsk agreements from 2014 and 2015, which were designed to bring peace to eastern Ukraine. In 2023, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin, alleging responsibility for the unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children. Okay, the conflict remains ongoing, and the consequences are still unfolding. So now we understand more about the man, his upbringing, his training, the system that shaped him. But history may shape a person. It does not remove personal responsibility. Putin has made choices. Now here's something important to understand. Inside Russia, his popularity has often been high. The 1990s were a time of severe instability. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia experienced economic shock therapy. Hyperinflation, unpaid wages, rising poverty, and the sudden loss of global status. Organized crime flourished. Many Russians remember that decade as chaotic and humiliating. When Putin came into power in 2000, Russia entered a period of relative stability. During his early years, poverty rates declined significantly. Wages and pensions were paid more reliably. The economy grew, helped in large part by rising oil and gas prices. The state invested heavily in military. Infrastructure projects expanded. Healthcare funding increased. Living standards improved for many Russians compared to the 1990s. He also positioned himself as a defender of traditional Russian identity and as a leader willing to push back against NATO expansions and U.S. influence. For many Russians, He restored a sense of order and national pride. But stability and strength came with increasing centralization of power, reduced political competition, restrictions on independent media, and tighter control over dissent. So, how does this shape the relationship between Russia and the United States? The US Russia relationship today is one of deep distrust, or so it appears. With the release of many of the Epstein files, there is now evidence that Epstein and Bannon were having talks with Putin long before the 2016 US elections. I went through many of these files, and Epstein seems to be 1. Offering assistance to Putin to get Russia back on the map as a world superpower, and 2. Offering his assistance with understanding how Trump operates. There has been talks that Epstein was a foreign agent. This email between him and the former Prime Minister of Norway from 2013 would suggest Putin was aware of Epstein's agent status. We have all heard Trump whine about the Russian hoax. Maybe it's time to connect the dots, or maybe I am imagining things. It has already been proven in the 2019 Mueller report that Putin personally ordered Project Lacta, a hacking and disinformation campaign designed to diminish Hillary Clinton and support Donald Trump. Now, Trump blames Hillary for this, but why would she belittle herself? Something Trump does. He blames others for things that he did, but there was no evidence that he was involved. Years later, now we are all looking at the Epstein files and many emails between Bannon, Thiel, and Epstein about Trump's campaign, hiding his taxes. Epstein was being invited to Mar-a-Lago for meetings to give recommendations on cabinet members. And it was Epstein and Bannon who already had an established relationship with Putin in 2016 and were working in the background to get Trump elected. So, what do you think? We also know that Trump did not have a relationship with Putin at this time from a Twitter post he made in 2013. However, we can assume that Putin knew about Trump. And no, Putin did not go to the pageant, he sent a representative. I will apologize right now, I'm not going to pronounce these names properly. Yuri Shevets, a former KGB major, now based in the US, claimed Trump had been on Soviet intelligence radar as early as 1977 and was gradually cultivated over decades. He said that during Trump's 1987 Moscow visit, Trump was subject to a charm offensive and fed propaganda talking points. Alner Masayev, a former head of Kazakhstan's security service with roots in the KGB, commented that Trump was recruited in 1987 by the KGB and assigned the codename Krasnov. Sergei Sironov, another ex-KGB officer living in France, who reportedly collaborated Masayev's claims, alleged that during Trump's 1987 visit, KGB actively monitored his movements, including embedding agents among his hotel staff and companions. Oleg Kalugin, retired KGB general, suggested that it's plausible the Soviets may have compiled comprising files on Trump during his 1987 trip, including potential entrapment via interest-linked individuals, though he didn't claim Trump was an agent, just that the files may exist. Unfortunately, there's no way to prove or disprove these claims, as all KGB files were destroyed in 1991. However, as an agent, Putin would have had access to such files. And during the Atlantic City casino days, there was much speculation of Trump being funded by the Russian mob and laundering funds. However, the FBI was not able to make the connections. What about Trump and Putin? The fact that Trump idolizes Putin was evident in his post from 2013. I came across this email, not sure who it is from, but it is someone who saw the danger before Trump even took office and was aware of how he wanted to be just like his hero, Putin. It says, I'm not sure it's safe long-term or a good opinion or option to live in the U.S. for a Trump-Pence presidency with Bannon as a key advisor. Am I wrong? The hate, anti-Semitism, swastikas painted all over the park a few blocks from me, and his, meaning Trump, desire to be Putin. All super concerning. Another email from Paul Krasner, author, in 2017. I think this would have been his last book, and I can't see where it was ever published. He died in July 2019. This page 1 is just the evidence. It reads, hope things are going well for you. I finally finished trimming down my collection from 700 pages to 400. 60 years of investigative satire, the best of PK. The piece below is the last one in the book. You've previously seen the first half. Enjoy. Okay, between the choice of a one-man, one-vote Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and fake news of weapons of mass destruction, invasion of Iraq, and horror of ISIS, George Bush was elected president in the year 2000. It was due to the Electoral College, a rigged system which originally intended to prevent slaves from voting and evolved to gerrymandering. Even though Bush's opponent Al Gore won the national popular vote, Hillary Clinton was elected senator that year, and she announced the first thing she would do was to get rid of the Electoral College. A few years later, as a columnist for the New York Press, I sent her a letter asking about the status of that promise. She didn't reply. Okay, so now it was actually page 2 that made me laugh, unfortunately. November 8th, 2016, a crooked businessman, liar extraordinaire, bragging pussy grabber, make America white again, anti-choice, anti-Semite, fake Christian, climate change hoaxer, Twitter addict, homophobic, apprentice politician, friendly fascist, and Vladimir Putin's useful idiot named Donald Trump, who was elected as an insanely narcissistic dictator based on the Electoral College, whereas his opponent, Hillary Clinton won the national popular vote by more than 3 million individuals. Irony lives. But an incredibly cruel monster inadvertently awakened a sleeping population to counteract the essence of evil with love, laughs, and law, fueled by the aid of true news. Incidentally, Putin had 88 journalists murdered. No wonder Trump told him, "It's an honor to be with you." Now, Putin wanted new Obama's sanctions on Russia to be reprieved. I'm sure it kept going on, but I didn't read any further. That was the only part that was about Trump. But just imagine what could have happened if Hillary did indeed get rid of the Electoral College. Damn it! Clearly, there is a complete idolization or envy towards Putin that makes it so easy for him to manipulate Trump and use him as his personal little puppet. Trump claims if he had been in office in 2022, Russia would never have invaded Ukraine. Well, this is the same ego that makes him think that the 2020 election was rigged. He can't admit that he doesn't have control. Actually, since Trump returned to office in 2025, Putin's invasion of Ukraine has become more aggressive. For the most part of 2025, it seemed every time Trump said he spoke to Putin, an aggressive attack on Ukraine followed. In December, reports surfaced about a 28-point peace proposal for Ukraine. Top U.S. lawmakers revealed that Secretary of State Marco Rubio told them the plan was actually a wish list drawn up by the Kremlin. The widely leaked proposal had already faced criticism because it was drafted by Trump's administration officials in coordination with their counterparts in Moscow, without any input from Kiev. Senators Mike Rounds and Angus King confirmed this information at a security conference in Canada. From Ukraine's perspective, the plan wasn't just unhelpful. It looked like a deal written by their adversary, delivered by someone claiming to broker peace. Negotiations like this are more than words on paper. They are about power, leverage, and trust. And in this case, Ukraine was asked to consider terms that heavily favored Russia, packaged under the guise of U.S. diplomacy. In early 2026, a delay in U.S. weapons deliveries left some Patriot air defense systems with low inceptors at a time when Ukraine most needed them to defend energy infrastructure. This was not because of foreign policy strategy, but because Congress had not yet approved the latest aid package, meaning weapons couldn't legally be delivered until funding was resolved. At the end of January, Trump reportedly reached out to Putin asking him to declare a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine. The reason given was humanitarian winter conditions, and many Ukrainians were without power, heat, or basic services. The ceasefire reportedly lasted only a few days before attacks resumed, even though it had been reported that he would give them a week. But Trump walked it back, saying it was a week he spoke to him, which was not what had been reported originally. The episode highlights a simple but harsh reality. In a conflict of this scale, individual requests or goodwill gestures rarely override strategic objectives. For Ukraine, it was a brief reprieve, but the fighting and suffering continues. According to a report on Nexta TV, during the UAE Peace Summit, secret talks were allegedly held involving Witkoff and Dmitry. Ukraine intelligence reportedly uncovered what they call the Dmitriev package, a document suggesting that if Ukraine surrendered, Russia would agree to a $12 trillion trade deal with the US. Economically, this figure is far beyond Russia's GDP, making the plan implausible. But the report shows the type of high stakes and imaginative deals being discussed behind closed doors in the conflict. Trump is just stupid enough to fall for it. Thankfully, Zelensky is not. So, Trump may want to be like Putin, but this could never happen. Why? Putin had a fairly healthy childhood. Trump did not. Putin can read and speaks more than one language. Trump has never read a book and struggles with one language. Putin has been physically and mentally fit his whole life. Trump is overweight, weak, and is slowly losing what mental capacity he still has. Putin has military training. Trump was a deserter. Putin cares about the citizens of his country. Trump cares about the rich and getting richer. Putin is capable of empathy, which requires a heart and a soul. Two things Trump is lacking. So now we understand a little bit more about Vladimir Putin. Not to excuse his actions, but to understand how his past, his upbringing, and his worldview have shaped the decisions he makes today. History, ideology, and personal experience all play a role in the choices of powerful leaders. Knowing this doesn't make him any less dangerous, but it helps us to see the patterns and perhaps find better ways to respond to them. Until next time, stay warm, stay safe, be kind, and stay groovy. Peace and love, you all.